All right, welcome to the February 4th meeting of the Economic Matters Committee. Present today are myself, Alderwoman Alsop Johnson, and Alderman Savage. First off, can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Can I get a second?
So moved.
That is seconded.
Second.
All right, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Up next, can I get a motion to approve the minutes from our January 7th meeting?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, up first, 04025, 12-month moratorium on new short-term rental licenses. O'Neill and Littman. We do not have anyone from the mayor's office or Alderwoman O'Neill here, but we do have Director Kubiak. So, sir, if you could please come up and join us at the table. Welcome, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Good evening. Good to see you all.
Good evening.
All right, so you could please go over the moratorium. I am assuming you have been working with the administration on the intended goal and outcome of this legislation.
I'm familiar with the legislation. I've had a chance to review it and the various amendments to it.
Okay, but you have not been working with the administration. This is not coming from your office.
It's not coming from my office. It's
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so in that case, one of the main questions that we have is the 49% of the non-compliant, roughly 49% of the non-registered, 49% short-term rentals are not registered, according to that report that came out approximately at the end of last year. How was that determined?
Well, I believe in that you're referring to the annual report, our first annual report,
Yes, sir.
At the time, we didn't have a way of differentiating between registered or licensed short-term rentals. What that is a measure of the percentage of listings on host compliance that were actually licensed by the city. So when we began engaging with the property owners and sending letters out for enforcement, we learned that quite a few are, in fact, the short-term rentals, meaning they're set up for the two special events each year and not long-term rentals. So our notion of what was compliant or not is narrowed down considerably. And as a result of the letters and the outreach, more people have signed on and become licensed. So there were a number of individuals that were operating beyond the bounds. And we also got a better handle on the fact that a lot of license or a lot of short-term rentals were simply listed. And they're listed, but they're only being used during those special events each year. So we've narrowed down and become much more refined and continue to refine the data. And it's not particularly easy, frankly, using the sources that we have available to us, but we're getting a better handle on it.
So that 49% contained a lot of our special events, which don't even require that license. So like boat show, graduation week for the Naval Academy.
Right.
Do you have an approximate idea of the true number of year-round unlicensed short-term rentals in the city?
No, I don't have it. We have a true idea of those that are actually licensed, and the number as of today is 339. We have 3 that have been applications that have been submitted this week, and also this week we had to deny two of them. So it's constant flux. We expect the number to continue to rise. So it is higher than the number that was in that staff report, partly because people got into compliance based on our letters, and we provided a grace period for compliance. And our letters had the effect of surprising a lot of people. Some people didn't realize that their property was listed on Airbnb. That's what they conveyed to us. that they bought the house, they didn't know it was listed or that it was still listed. So there was some cleanup going on. So I think the number of short-term rentals out there that are listing is becoming more narrow and becoming much more in compliance with the short-term rental law in the city.
Okay. So, kind of fascinated by how we get people who don't know their property is listed.
Yeah.
One of life's little mysteries there. So, the number proposed for the moratorium, 12 months. Now, what would your department do in that 12-month period that it could not do in, say, a 3-month or a 6-month or a 7-month? What could be done in that 12 months that those shorter proposals would not allow?
The 12 months would allow us to coordinate with key stakeholders, including other city staff and city's leaders, to evaluate the current conditions in a very clear way, present evidence, share what we have, and go a little deeper in our research, but also provide the city as a whole time to reflect on any policy changes or ordinance changes. Certainly, if there were a text amendment to the city code, that would take considerable amount of time to get through the approval process. That 12 months is more aligned with a process that would be more far-reaching and involving other people and still allow the council time to change policy or change code.
So that 12 months allows a more robust stakeholder collection.
Yep.
Period. Okay. All right, that is all the questions I have at this current moment. I'm going to turn the floor to my colleagues. Alderman Savage, do you have any questions for the record?
Yes, sir, I do, Mr. Chair. Thank you. A number of questions. And you know me, Mr. Chair, I like to opine and get on my soapbox, but it's not going to be directed towards you when I do, and more towards just the sponsors. Trying to think where to start. So, first of all, I guess I'll just say I do appreciate the annual report that you put together back in, was it June or July? A lot of great information in there, and I'll get into some of that. Well, I guess I'll get into some of that now. You mentioned in the report, let's see. So you have recommendations on, because one of the things we require, actually, maybe I'll just read that now. So the code requires a number of things. And actually, that's not it. One of them is, I'm trying to find it. Here it is. So the report includes a map containing location of short-term rental properties in the city, statistics on the number of short-term rentals, including new rental permits over the past year, any increases, decreases. C is analysis of the impact short-term rentals are having on the city. And then D, recommendations on any city code changes regarding short-term rentals. And then E, other information the director deems appropriate to help the city council set policy on short-term rentals. That's something we built into it back 3 or 4 years ago, I think, when we did the last major overhaul. And I just want to compare that a little bit to, and I know this is larger for my colleagues as well, but just point out in the legislation itself, if you look at page 2, line 22, it talks about the purpose of the moratorium. It says it's to provide the city council with adequate time to do, and it lists about five different things there. And For A, it talks about conducting a comprehensive study of the impact of short-term rentals. And this, really, I think is already addressed in the code I just read, right? It's something you're looking at already in the annual report. If you look at B, it talks about reviewing and analyzing short-term rental regulations adopted by other jurisdictions. This one is not required in the annual report. Certainly good information, but I wouldn't think this would take too long to put together. How much time do you think you might need to, assuming this would be handled by planning and zoning, would you or other staff, you think, need to do a analysis of what other jurisdictions are doing around short-term rentals?
Probably about 20 hours of professional time, effectively coordinating with the city manager's office and meeting with key folks in law office and the like. It's probably a month of, practice,
Okay.
a month of time to coordinate and share information and get feedback and understand what the various jurisdictions are doing around the country.
Okay. And then C talks about evaluating the effectiveness of current zoning and land use regulations as they relate to short-term rentals. I'm not quite sure what legislation is getting at with that. Because effectiveness is not really defined. I think, when we get to it, I'll have an amendment that seeks to kind of clarify some of these and narrow them down, but do you have any more information on that particular item?
Yeah, I mean, I think any serious study of short-term rentals has to look at it in the context of our housing supply and the impact on our housing supply and our impact on land use within those areas where there's a concentration. Because it's clear that where there's concentration of short-term rentals, there is in fact a change of land use. Mm-hmm. And it is felt by people, by residents. We hear it, and not everything that we hear triggers a code case, but we know it. I mean, it's the case. I mean, we understand it. So when we talk about the effectiveness of the zoning and our land use, we're thinking, does a concentration of short-term rentals or a certain number of short-term rentals create a need to reassess where our goals are, what our goals are for Annapolis, and our comprehensive plan kind of challenges us to do that, and it addresses short-term rentals, as you know, in that way. So I think a really critical, thoughtful review will take some time to really understand and assess the tolerances among the city's decision makers for the amount of short-term rentals, the level, the concentration, and what other jurisdictions have encountered in terms of their approaches. In Annapolis, short-term rentals are regulated entirely through the licensing authority, not through zoning, but other jurisdictions do take a zoning approach or blend the approaches. Right now, the city allows by right, essentially, a residential property to be put to short-term rental use without regard to its location or its impact or anything else. It just allows it. The fact that this moratorium is before us suggests that not everybody's square with the impacts on that. People have concerns about it. So.
Yeah, for sure. But I think my broader point is that, and again, it's not targeting you, but just to say that I think the proper process in my mind is to utilize the information we have, seek out some additional information, and figure out what kind of policy we want to introduce as legislators. Get that set in motion with staff, working with staff, but that doesn't require a moratorium. A moratorium kind of assumes the outcome, right? It's a moratorium on new licenses, which assumes we're going to make changes, that we're all going to agree on making changes that may prohibit somebody from having a short-term rental in certain areas of the city. That's a large assumption, and I think it's a bit backwards to, again, lead with the outcome as opposed to lead with the legislation, have the dialogue, develop the consensus as the council.
Well, I think the moratorium assumes that there are some adverse impacts of short-term rentals and suggests that before those adverse impacts grow through increased licensing, let's study them and come to terms with what the best approach is to mitigate those impacts. It might be through reducing the number, as you suggest, or it might be through other regulation to minimize their impacts. But like any moratorium presumes what's being stopped temporarily has some adverse impact on the community. We need to get our arms around the issue in a way that is thoughtful and gives us time to grapple with it.
Yeah.
And I read the whereas statements and recitals, and of course the recitals are not part of the ordinance themselves in a meaningful way, but they're important to set up. And it occurred to me that it hints at this, but it doesn't really say we're concerned about the impacts of short-term rental. It sort of assumes everyone has a shared understanding of what those impacts are. And it occurred to me as in preparing for this meeting that maybe the real amendments to these whereas statements should be that whereas we understand that short-term rentals have had adverse impacts, including the following, and it's typical, communities have struggled with these issues. And before we open ourselves to continue with them, we'd like to study this in a way that builds consensus on a different approach. I mean, that's effectively what a moratorium does.
Yeah, for sure. And they do voice their concerns, and that is, again, one of my disagreements with the moratorium is it makes a lot of assumptions about the way it's worded, that they present a crime, public safety issue, that they create noise, and those things which I think are assumptions, as you said, right? We have, and whenever we've heard those indications, like we did back when we did the big overhaul, back, what was it now, 6 years ago, the first time we did this, we responded to those specific public concerns. That's why we have processes built in to address noise. We have processes built in to address the nuisance, any nuisance issue that pops up. Right. And so, and as well, we just passed the density legislation. And so, but that's one of my big issues with it. It assumes that they're all bad, when I think there's a bit of a fundamental, and this is one of the things I want to ask you about, because the comprehensive plan talks about, aiming for, 15-minute city, 20-minute city? 15-minute city, walkability, right? Mixed use. And in my mind, short-term rentals, even if it is non-owner occupied, it's a non-residential use. Yes, I fully acknowledge that, but from a planner's perspective, and this is something I think Alderman Schneidermeyer has really helped to teach me over the years, is like our exclusionary zoning that's just limited to one particular use, in this case residential, is different from what we used to have in the past, right? Mm-hmm. We have a lot of neighborhoods that used to have remnants of like corner stores and things like that, and it seems like the comp plan is trying to get back to that. So, but the moratorium is almost like trying to keep us on that exclusionary track instead of embracing ideas in the comp plan, which is like, having non-residential uses are not bad as long as they're kept in moderation, right?
Right. Can I speak candidly and add
Please,
some context to that? So we have 330, I think by tomorrow there'll be 340 short-term rentals. Can you remember a time when the city approved a housing development of 340 units? It's just a negative. There's 340 occupiable housing units that are not on the market now. And that's about 2%, just over 2% of our rental housing. That's a substantial thing. And when we talk about walkable communities and 15-minute cities, what short-term rental does is provide that benefit to visitors. We don't have a walkable community when our residents don't live in units that are walkable. So we are trying to build walkable neighborhoods and walkable development projects elsewhere in the city, but we have a major development project distributed across the most walkable parts of our city, and city residents aren't living there. They're not providing to the long-term stability of the community. there are short-term rentals. Of course, there are benefits to certain aspects of the tourism industry, but the short-term rentals are not necessarily aligned with a walkable community, like building our community. We're actually walking away from walkability by the conversion to short-term rentals. So that's the balance. I mean, that's the reality of.
Yeah, and
how I see it.
I don't disagree at all as far as the, some communities have too many short-term rentals. And I think the thing we would need to look at, and again, this doesn't require a moratorium to look at, is to forecast based on the 10% cap, how much, and the lottery, assuming that it survives legal challenges, what number would that get us down to, right? Because that is going to lead to a significant reduction on some of these streets that have 50, 60% short-term rentals, right? So what is the number after that? Is that going to get us down? Because I hear you, and I don't think you're saying that there's no valid use of a short-term rental, right? I'm assuming well, what do you think? Do you think there's a valid use for short-term rentals in our, from a planning perspective?
I think the costs are significant to a community where housing is in such need. And I mean, there are studies that done by academics to demonstrate the increase in rental housing on account of short-term rentals. For every, additional short-term rentals, the rent increases marginally, but it does increase. The short-term rental, the long-term rental increases. But it's a matter of priorities. It's a matter of goals. What type of community do we want to be, and to what extent does short-term rental growth impact our housing goals? And it's a balancing act, essentially. If I were in your shoes, I'd have some opinions that are clear that I'd advocate for. But in essence, I think the full council reflects a diversity of viewpoints on this question, because it's a tough question, and it does. But it's clear it does have impacts on our availability of housing, and certainly within many communities when the neighbor next door is not there anymore. And even short-term rentals those units are not occupied year-round, right? I mean, there are peak seasons where they operate. So there are often many units where the lights are out.
Yeah, but I don't see there's not much difference when it comes down to as far as allowing a little corner store, community grocery store, whatever, a little office in a bakery in a neighborhood. That's still a non-residential use that's taking away housing, yet we want those, right? And I would think having some amount of short-term rentals would be helpful as far as generating foot traffic and economic development. And so I guess that's one thing that we're looking for. What are some of the ideal numbers, right? Mm-hmm. One we threw out there was 10%. But yeah, and I think before I yield the floor for now, there was one other thing related to this, which you mentioned in your annual report. You had a number of recommendations. You supported the 10% cap 017, which would pass, but you did acknowledge, that we would need a way to reduce the density, to actually achieve the 10%, which we did with the lottery amendment. And then you recommended supporting the ADU legislation, which unfortunately we withdrew. And then the third thing was, let's see, you got into, which I wanted to learn more about. You mentioned taking a zoning approach. It says, if Annapolis deployed its zoning tools, this use, which inherently differs from standard residential uses, short-term rentals would be designated as a distinct use under Chapter 2148. Standards and related conditions could then be made applicable. Now, this approach then could be used to place limits on the proliferation of short-term rentals by zoning district. We don't have to have the whole conversation today, but I'm kind of curious what that would look like.
Yeah, I think it could look like a a line in the table of permitted uses. You know, there's a table for permitted uses for every zoning district. And one of the permitted uses is a short-term rental. It's permitted by right under certain circumstances in certain areas, but perhaps not in other areas. Or perhaps there's an overlay district where short-term rentals are allowed, but not in other areas. Perhaps areas that are further removed from the tourist hubs are more restrictive in terms of the allowable short-term rentals. Where the land use changes has happened already and the short-term rentals really contribute to the vitality of the tourism district, perhaps you're more lenient on that. But it is a change of use. And it's one that comes about not through zoning, but through licensing procedures. But it is a fundamental change of land use. And so the approach that I think ought to be considered is the zoning approach. In combination with licensing, but because the zoning is ultimately the land use control for the city council.
So for example, some zoning districts, it would be a permitted use by right. Others, it might be permitted via, I don't know, special exception, that kind of.
Well,
some it might be
perhaps, maybe not by
prohibited.
special exception. I think we tend to create too many special
Yeah.
exceptions, but perhaps it's permitted by race, but by right, but still limited. I mean, you still have the concentration standards. There's no doubt about that. And typically those standards show up in zoning ordinances. That's because someone counts them, someone relates that within certain areas, there's a rational basis for limiting those, whereas in other areas, there's larger lots perhaps can be more lenient in terms of the concentration. Closer in lots where the impact is magnified to adjoining property owners might be treated differently. But there's that lens of geography and space and land use and zoning, I think has a lot to lend to this discussion. And it may be that it's a better approach than simply saying essentially, wherever there's a house, a short-term rental can take place, except for now the 10% cluster provision is
Yeah.
in place, of course. But generally, that's what the code allows, up to 10% on a block face.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I can see that as certainly.
So, I mean, I think that ought to be explored candidly, and as the
Yeah.
planning and zoning director, and we've talked about it in our office too, about how that's a kind of important discussion to have.
Well, so going back to the moratorium, the other item it states as a purpose is to hold public hearings, which again, I think we've done plenty of over the past 6-7 years on this issue. The last thing was draft review, adopt comprehensive short-term rental regulations, which I think is kind of what you are alluding to. But again, I don't think that requires a moratorium per se. A few other specific points, then I'll be done. How many, I thought I heard you mention that you're posting roughly 30 unlicensed properties a week, or was that a month? I'm trying to recall. Would you have a number that you're
That we're what?
posting? The number of unlicensed short-term rentals that you're posting notice of violation on?
No, I didn't say 30.
How many do you know how many you've brought into compliance or?
Yeah, roughly 50, 40 to 50. 288 as of September to 339 now. It's 41, I think. And also by bringing into compliance, a number of have simply stopped doing it and are now complying with the code in the sense that they're not operating. But we increased the number of licensed operators just simply by informing people of the requirement to have a license.
Okay, and
We have we're most focused on renewing, because with a base of 339 and they require annual renewals, we spent a lot of time processing renewals, Then there's an annual inspection, so someone goes out and inspects the unit. And so right now, we have 52 in that process of renewal and with inspections scheduled. That's an ongoing, candidly, it's an ongoing requirement that does require a lot of manpower. Anyway, that's the bulk of this kind of staff time devoted to renewals processing.
And so I think we're getting a work session scheduled with
Yeah.
your department to go over some of the enforcement needs and just general assessment. So I'll save some of
On
those.
this topic, right, on short-term rentals,
Yeah.
as we're calling, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because personally, I'd like to see this moratorium focus more towards the budget as far as what resources do we need to enhance the program, because we heard a lot of concerns about compliance. So the one question, one to just point out, when I spoke with Airbnb, they mentioned that, I asked them specifically, I'm like, well, do you have the ability on your platform to require that they can't even submit their home unless they have a license number? And they do. They said I forget what state, I'd have to look at my notes.
New York City.
New York City. There's another one too where they do it, where they're required. So it's easy enough for them to do locally. We just haven't, that's probably a conversation to have with the law office at some point. Or maybe we need to tweak our code, but that would be a relatively quick way to get some of these properties in compliance.
Right.
That's all I have for now, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alderman Savage. Alderman Alsop Johnson, do you have any questions for Director Kubiak?
Not at this moment.
All right, thank you. So I do want to say, bringing up the point of when was the last time we approved 300 units and we're seeing all these neighborhoods or units taken offline, it comes down to the issue of supply, and where these are highest concentrated happens to be in the areas that it is the most impossible to add supply overall in housing, both long-term, for long-term regardless. Taking part in the C1, the R2, R1s, and R1NC. So I do see this as a bit of a symptom of that larger problem, but we can get into that at a later time. All right, so we have some folks here, I'm assuming, who wish to submit testimony.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
Is there another question from Director?
Yes.
May. So you mentioned, I forgot to ask this, the needing to increase the fee. I'm trying to find, I think you mentioned it in the annual report. Potentially, is that going to come up with the budget deliberations?
I think so. I hope so. I think a fee increase would be advisable. If we want to kind of deflect some of the additional costs to the city and the time that staff is spending on short-term rentals is not applying to permit management and housing inspections and all the other important things we do. So, and I don't know what that fee exactly ought to be, but it's something we're considering.
Okay. And have you received, do you have a list anywhere of the complaints that have been received? Because as we try to figure out what the impact has been on some communities, I think it'd be good to be able to quantify some of those impacts through complaints.
Okay. We'll be ready for that at the work session.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Director Kubiak. So we have two folks here, I'm assuming are here to testify. If you wish to do so, we allow 3 minutes of testimony. After that, we will ask that you wrap it up.
Do we go there?
Yes, please. Yep. Just 1 second while I get the clock ready, please. All right, if you could please say your name and address for the record, and then we will start the clock.
Thank you. Katie McDermott, 50 Franklin Street, Annapolis.
Oh, mic's not on, apologies. Here, reset it.
Doing the right thing? Okay, I
There we go.
apologize.
All right, name and address for the record, please.
Yes, thank you. Katie McDermott, 50 Franklin Street. I simply would urge passage of the moratorium without significant substantive amendment. I don't know what the amendments are that may be proposed to narrow the review, but I think the fundamental issue is what the planning director has suggested. STRs do impact housing and housing options, and when you have less land, you need more management. And on the zoning question is very interesting. It's why I think we don't have a constitutional issue in regulating STRs, because it's a licensure issue, which is a privilege that can be waived and can be regulated. But the impact on housing is quite significant and unexplored completely in the last round of legislation. So in terms of the merits of the other aspects of the ordinance, I think having time to take a look at it would be very, very smart. You may recall there was no staff or fiscal impact on the lottery amendments that were added to the bill. So this is, I think, wise public policy and a well-drafted moratorium that really will benefit this city long-term. So I hope you can give it some favorable consideration. Thank you kindly.
All right, anyone else? Seeing none. All right, let's close this out for today. So we do have a couple amendments that were submitted to us today, and then we have a couple more in the hopper. Seeing that the ones in the hopper are not prepared for us, I do want to give those time to get drafted. Ms. Reuter, do we think we can get those finalized by the March meeting? I think so. All right, excellent. Seeing as, again, these ones were just finalized today, put up into Granicus incision today, I would like to go over amendments 1 and 2 along with the rest of the amendments that are prepared. Just give folks a quick update. Amendment 1 goes over detailed requirements, proof of residency, and Amendment 2 is an interior report for the city manager on the final 60 days before the moratorium ends. So going to hold off on going over those so we have time to go over them, wait until we can get those final ones updated and submitted and printed out, and then we can go over, finalize, and vote on this in our March meeting is my preference.
I would would you entertain a motion?
Yeah, so I'd like to entertain a motion to postpone action until our March, when is our March meeting? March 4th, all right. Till our March 4th meeting.
So moved.
Can I get a second, please?
A second.
All right, all those in favor? Director Kubiak, thank you for the detailed presentation. We appreciate it, sir.
Thank you.
All right, up next on the agenda. Hold on, let me get my agenda up. Ms. Jackson, do you have a printed version of the agenda that I can just look at real quick while I try to get the... Next up is ID 826, Economic Development Update. Mr. Stroud, thank you for joining us, sir.
Very welcome. Thank you for having me, as always. So, I was able to submit my report prior to the meeting. I hope everyone had a chance to take a look at it. This time, I thought it would be prescient to add building permits as well, as opposed to just UNO, because they represent real investment coming back into the city. So what I will be doing for subsequent committee meetings is creating essentially a pipeline. So I have here the number of building permits that were issued for the month of January, as well as those that were applied for the month of January, so that you can have a sense of progression as building owners make improvements to their properties, because that represents real, or I should say, potential increase in assessed value for those properties over time. Right, this is investment coming back into the city. So for January, total building permits, as you can see, based on estimated cost of the project, is $2,556,500 for 1 month. I'd say that's substantial for a city of this size. As it pertains to UNO permits, we have 3 new permitted businesses. All are new, and one is Maritime. It's a contractor for the U.S. Navy. So it's great to have them here. I had a chance to visit with them, been in contact with their leadership, and they're excited to be here. So, so just going through, I'm not going to go through all the individual numbers. I'm happy to entertain questions once I complete my report, but I just thought that having that additional data and over time could be a benefit for the committee. So I want to quickly discuss the recent winter storm that we experienced and the business response. So thanks to Hope Stewart, businesses were alerted well before the winter storm of how to prepare and what responsibilities that they had, including clearing of sidewalks in advance. So she sent out a mass email on the Friday before the storm. And then after that, we didn't have too many reports the initial few days, but a few problematic areas that we received calls from, and then we added to the list of areas that required more attention with Maryland Avenue. So we had a number of businesses on Maryland Avenue reach out to us on Monday, this past Monday, expressing issues. And then the same with Dock Street. So Dock Street, obviously, with the construction fencing, made it difficult for snow and ice removal, but I'm happy to report that as of yesterday afternoon, and some of you may have seen, Dock Street's completely clear. No snow or ice, including that on the sidewalk. And that's all thanks to a number of actors, including Transit, Public Works, and Whiting Turner, who aided in the clearing of snow and ice. So,
I was there this afternoon for lunch. I can corroborate that
Yes.
statement.
yeah, and it was perfect timing because we had a successful visit with the Commerce Secretary yesterday, and we walked down Dock Street, so it was pristine for his visit. So kudos to all those other departments, and most importantly to OEM for organizing the response. It was a very seamless process for me to report these issues to them and for them to coordinate the response and the different departments to come in and clean it up. Because Transit worked with Premium to put no parking signs, so that way that the other actors, Public Works and Whiting Turner, could come in, clear all the snow and ice, and then Premium very quickly came back, removed the signs. So I'm happy to report the businesses were satisfied by that response. So, as of now, we just continue to monitor the situation, respond as we receive requests from businesses. I did receive an email from a concerned citizen who slipped on some ice from a business that did not clear its sidewalk. So while not necessarily in our purview, we take these very seriously, and I push that along the proper channels to ensure that citations were met. So. So City Dock project updates. So the City Dock project continues. The construction fencing is now present, so I'm sure you've all seen that. Mitchell, Stevenson, and I, as well as Logan Rips, a new addition to Public Information Office, hung signs along Dock Street to attempt to create some sense of place. It's something initial that we're doing, and we're expanding. Right now, we're working on potentially signage in other areas, including the other side of the construction fencing. The directional signage is very important along Dock Street. It's something that I'm working with Public Works to ensure that's present. I've had conversations with the Annapolis Police Department as well for potentially helping to direct traffic if needed when things start to get busy, now that it's a one-way street. But signage will play a key role in ensuring the flow of traffic along Dock Street. We've also been in discussions with Public Works about developing, as well as Transit, is developing a quick pickup drop-off area along Dock Street. So 15-minute loading, unloading, which will allow for patrons to go in and perhaps buy coffee or quick service meals or food delivery services to utilize it without having to take up other parking spaces. So it's something that we're hoping to have implemented here shortly, along with additional directional signage, one way, do not enter, keeping motorists from going the wrong direction. Importantly, I have begun bi-weekly meetings with Whiting Turner. So every 2 weeks, Whiting Turner and I meet, we discuss upcoming issues, and perhaps they need information conveyed to the businesses and vice versa. So I play that role. First meeting's been incredibly productive. We hope to continue that. So any concerns the businesses have are getting directly to Whiting Turner in an organized manner with a dedicated feedback loop. So that's where we are right now. We have a number of other initiatives that we're working on, and I hope to be able to report to you in the next meeting. Dock Streets, it's under construction right now. We need to make it the best place we can for our visitors and residents, because a lot of those businesses rely on foot traffic. So our two big goals are just increasing foot traffic and quality of place. We want people to get there, and when they get there, we want them to come back. So that's my report for the month of January. I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Strout. So first off, question on what you first stated about the new businesses coming in.
Right.
Would it be possible for you to ask if a representative from that new Navy contractor could come in and introduce themselves at our next Economic Matters meeting? I'd love to have them
Absolutely.
introduce themselves, say a
Yeah.
little bit about their business. I'm pretty excited to get a new maritime company to come in Annapolis. We've been making a lot of investments into strengthening our maritime business climate, and I see that as a success story for this committee and the work that we did last year, and I want to toot our horn a little bit.
Absolutely. No, I'd be happy to make that request tomorrow. And to be clear, it is a software provider. So not maritime in the traditional sense, but one in the sense that it's essential for the Navy's mission as it is today. And I think they'd be a great addition to the mixed maritime zone in Eastport where they're located. So
The maritime industry in the 21st century is more than what it used to be. I fully understand.
Absolutely.
So second, I am really excited to hear about some of the updates and oncoming plans that we have to assist our Dock Street businesses. The pickup drop-up location was requested by Biddy and Bose, and when I had forwarded that request over, I was very pleased to know that you guys were already on that. And for my colleagues, why that was very important to Biddy and Bose is they have staff members with special needs. So having a pickup and drop off for some of those special needs staff is very essential from a safety standpoint.
Yes.
How many of those spaces are we planning on providing?
So initial conversations and where we landed at would be 2 spaces.
2 spaces?
2 parallel parking spaces, yes.
Okay.
Yep. I'm waiting on final confirmation from Public Works, but that's where we landed.
And do we have an approximate timeline on when we think we could get those finalized?
I'm still waiting on that confirmation, as is APD.
Okay, thank you.
So I reached out today. I know, and obviously, this is something that we've been working on for a few weeks now, but the winter storm has kind of put a halt on it for a number of reasons, logistically, as well as just the team there at Public Works is prioritizing that as they should, so.
Could not possibly imagine why that would backburner that.
Yeah. So,
All right, so that is all the questions that I have. Alderman Savage?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, yes. So, yeah, good to hear about the loading zone. I think that's a great idea. I did want to just focus in on questions on the Dock Street.
yes.
So, because I'm hoping that for the spring we can look towards taking a different approach. Because I think now pedestrian traffic's just going to be, slow anyway, because it's cold, lots of snow laying
Yes.
around. But for the spring, I think there are a lot more things we could look to do. So I guess I want to get a clarity on a couple things. So currently, is it 2-way or 1-way down Dock Street?
It is one way.
It's 1-way.
It's
okay.
one way. If you're coming up Craig Street, you would take a right onto Dock Street. It becomes one way. You go down on Randall. You go down Dock Street, and then you take a left on Craig, and that's one way, and then Prince George, you would take another left, which is also one way.
So
So
it's-
that's the
it's-
flow of
So
traffic.
just eastbound.
Yeah,
People
correct.
go eastbound.
Yes, eastbound.
Okay, and so for the parking, we're leaving, I'm looking at the sketch you sent us.
Yeah.
There's the diagonal slanted parking that we're leaving down there, and I think you
And
said
that-
it's like, what, 12?
And that, roughly, and that's been restriped as well to face the other direction.
Okay, that makes sense, yeah.
Yeah.
12 spots,
And there's an accessible van space at the end of, it's a parallel space, it's at the end of Dock Street. It had been there before, and that will be maintained.
okay.
Yeah.
And what about, because in the picture I see on-street curbside parking. Is that mostly removed except for the two loading areas?
It's mostly what, I'm sorry, I didn't.
Are those removed or are those still
No,
there?
they're still in use. They're still in use.
All
In
the-
fact, I've been in discussions with Public Works about potentially striping those as well, based on the feedback that I've received from some businesses along Dock Street.
How many curbside spots are there
That-
currently? Do you know?
That would be determined by, I'm not sure that'd be determined by Public Works if they did.
Currently, though.
Oh, parallel?
Parallel parking.
It depends on how the size of the cars and how many fit in, because they're not currently striped. The only striped spot is the van accessible at the end of Dock Street.
Okay. Okay, so you may be striping that to allow for more. Do you think you could find out how many, if we stripe it diagonally, how many new spots we would get from doing that?
Well, they would need to remain parallel in order to have the right of way sufficient for traffic to flow through. So they would be parallel.
So they're remaining parallel. Okay.
Right, they'd be
All right,
parallel.
Sorry, I misunderstood.
Yes, I'm sorry. No, those would remain parallel spaces. Only that so as per city code, parallel spaces must be 23 feet long. So they'd be in 23-foot increments. Were that to be the ultimate decision made by Public Works.
Well, because what I'm getting at is, I alluded to last time, I'm glad to hear that we made it one way, but I'm wondering if we could look at Craig Street and even Prince George and, for example, remove curbside parking on one side of the street to allow us to actually paint diagonal parking spots, right, temporarily on those streets, which would allow for more capacity, right, overall, with the idea of then removing the curbside parking on Dock Street. Because I'd really, again, like to see, some outdoor dining, something like that brought in, some attraction brought in to that
Right.
area to get the pedestrians in the spring and summer.
Right.
And so I think if we remove those cars, we can talk to assuming the restaurants are interested, and I'd assume they would be. But again, if we remove those parking spots, curbside parallel spots there, add some diagonal elsewhere on Craig and Prince George's, we might be able to even out the
Right.
parking that would be removed.
Well, my knowledge on this is somewhat limited. This is more of a conversation with transit, potentially Public Works. However, I can say that, Craig Street, for example, the width there needs to be able to accommodate not only truck traffic and heavy vehicle traffic due to the construction. So some of the deliveries that Whiting Turner will receive, or some of the traffic that will be going through, maybe through subcontractors, will need to go the wrong way down Dock Street occasionally, wherein they would need to have flaggers out to be able to safely move those vehicles through, because they don't have the capacity to make that turn onto Craig and then back in that direct. They'd have to come in the other way, and because they have another gate, they have a gate that they can go straight in and then turn into the construction site. Also, I know that that fire would need that lane open as well, because that's how they would get their emergency vehicles through. They would go through the construction entrance and then turn to go up Craig. So,
Yeah.
And Craig also has an area. One other thing that we're working on right now, it's very early, but we're hoping to have this deployed by March is actually create another stop from the Magenta shuttle on Dock Street. So to incorporate a Dock Street stop, which shouldn't affect the ride time of the shuttle in its entirety very much, just maybe a few more minutes, 1 or 2, depending on the volume of riders. But it will allow for visitors or residents who park at somewhere further away, right? Whether Hillman's full or whether for whatever reason they want to park in Park Place or somewhere else along the line, that will allow them direct access to Dock Street, and that we determine the best for safety and for convenience would be along Craig Street. That stop would be along Craig Street. So the addition of other parking in Prince George, I should say, the bottom portion of Prince George receives a significant amount of traffic from construction. So construction vehicles will back into Prince George, both for Burtis and Welcome Center and for the entire project.
Down Craig then?
Down Prince George, they go back down.
Oh, to Gate.
Yeah, they'd back down there, yeah. And then the Naval Academy, from what I'm being told, will eminently begin their construction as well. So that would create an additional challenge to have parking back there. And then we've received concerns from several residents along Prince George as well about the availability of parking. So I think it would, just in my opinion, based on the feedback that I've received, to limit the amount of commercial parking on Prince George for the sake of the residents, if possible. Understanding, I certainly understand where you're coming from. I would need to work with, Transit and Public Works to understand where there might be other areas for parking in that vicinity. Ultimately, the best place to park will end up being Hillman. I mean, that's why it was developed. So even now, I would argue, Hillman, you as a visitor or even as a resident who likes to come downtown, not as a resident of the city, but nearby, the periphery, I park at Hillman knowing that it's the most convenient option. So
Yeah, I mean, just personally, I'd rather, I mean, visitors should be parking at the parking garage, period. Unless they're disabled seniors, they want to get up close, or they're doing DoorDash, want to pick up food.
Right.
But again, I'll keep hammering the point. I'd like to try to continue to remove the cars to create some kind of attraction for
Certainly.
pedestrians.
Well, if there's anything particular you have in mind, I'd be happy to share with businesses, because ultimately I would imagine they would be ones who would have to activate the space. So I'm working with Hope Stewart right now to look at ways to maybe bring some programming down to the area. It's very early, but we know that having additional reasons for people to come down and visit Dock Street will help that with foot traffic, and what you're proposing could be a way to do that.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Alsop Johnson. Do you have any questions?
Not at this time.
All right. Strap, thank you so much for your presentation today. We really
Very welcome.
appreciate your time.
thank you.
All right. So that has concluded ID 826. Do we have, and that our listed agenda, do we have anything else for the good of the order? Seeing none, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you for joining us, everyone.